So, if you live in the United States, you probably experienced this lecture many times in your life. The United States government has 3 branches. No. So anyways, 3 branches. Boring! It's a lot more interesting and less cheesy than that. In my opinion, it's more like there are 3 brothers of government. You'll see why later. The reason there are 3 is so they can sort of cancel out one another, so no one branch or brother gets overpowered, like a game of rock, paper, scissors. This governmental structure was framed by the Constitution, which the Founding Fathers used as a blueprint for the new government. Let's talk about the judicial. The judicial is sort of like that middle child that no one really pays attention to. He's there, but no one really cares about him except for grandma, who once in a while buys him an ugly sweater. Or 5. However underlooked, the judicial is a very important part of the government system. To be fair, the Founding Fathers didn't really know what the heck the judicial was really supposed to do, or how much power it was supposed to have, which is why they pushed it all the way back to Article 3 and sort of just left the building blocks there. John Marshall is the one that gets the credit for making the judicial get even a chance at being a legitimate player at the game of government. Consisting of the Supreme Court and the flatteringly named inferior courts, the main job of the judicial is to judge whether or not things are constitutional and whether or not people are following the rules. This includes the legislative and the executive branch. Moving on to the executive. The executive is like the youngest brother, but he does get the most attention. To be clear, the Founding Fathers intentionally made him the little brother. After rejecting a king, the last thing they wanted was to have their new government fall to the hands of yet another king. Yes, France, I'm looking at you. Recently, the president and the executive have grown in power. His popularity and his obvious power in the face of foreign countries makes the rest of the brothers just a little bit jealous. The executive includes the president, the vice president, his cabinet, and sort of anyone that doesn't fall under the categories of the other 2 brothers. The main job of the executive, namely the president, is to enforce and pass or veto laws made by the legislative branch. Further, the president can sign treaties and is in charge of the US standing army, which means that he can wage war against foreign nations with the agreement of Congress. Not that anyone would try to break that rule or anything. The legislative is the oldest brother. He's often overshadowed by his little brother, the executive, and even though he is in charge of making the rules, the 30% voter turnout isn't really helping. He does have 2 houses though, which is nice. The Founding Fathers wanted this to be their greatest creation because the Confederation Congress was pretty bad at best. So they decided to make a relatively more powerful central government containing what we now know as Congress. It is a bicameral Congress. Because the little states feared that the big states would make them illegitimate, they came up with a compromise in which the House had proportional representation and the Senate had equal representation for the states. Congress is in charge of making laws and regulating finance as well as waging war. Such finance laws include raising the debt ceiling, which, as with most imaginary ceilings. Anyway, back to Congress. These laws can be approved or vetoed by the president, and when vetoed, it goes back to Congress, which needs a 2/3 vote in both houses to override the veto, which is basically the biggest ha-ha in your face the legislative can give the executive. However, with both houses, the legislative can effectively remove the president, more of an okay you're done type thing. The really big problem with Congress right now is that the 2 houses are split by party, and the House has a majority of Republicans and the Senate is dominated by Democrats. This obviously doesn't help them pass laws or anything, which is why, things aren't getting done. The big thing to remember here is that Congress, not the President, was intended to be the big boss of the governmental system when they framed the Constitution. So far, that remains true to some extent, but overall, the system has changed a lot since then. In the end, thinking of the parts of our government as branches fails to recognize the stunning complexity of the system. Just like brothers bicker and don't always cooperate, so too do the branches of the US government, and it is arguably this relationship between the branches, not the branches themselves, that make this government, which is for and by the people, so dynamic and fascinating. Thanks for watching. That's it. Nothing to see here.